So hello everyone, and welcome to a special event that is focused on this important topic of building and scaling digital healthcare collaborations. I'm Hamutal Shah, the CEO of Jalan City, and I would like to share that we Jalan City members are both excited and proud to host this event together with our partners from Imagine Bio and Matter. Well, I think that all three organizations, Jalan City, which is Jerusalem's largest forum of the bio-business ecosystem, Imagine Bio, that supports executives from Israel's medical and healthcare innovation ecosystem, and Matter, which is a healthcare startup incubator, community nexus, and also corporate innovation accelerator. All these three important organizations have strong belief in the necessity of collaboration from all kinds to promote innovation in the field of healthcare. This belief led us to join forces, have this valuable event, and present a unique view on both strategical and practical aspects of successful collaboration in order to support our communities and promote innovation. Well, it's time to start. I'm pleased to invite our partner, Mr. Elia Budik, to present Imagine Bio's valuable 2020 Israel Digital Health Report.
And many who took part in the work that we're doing here. So I want to give some quick background here. Thankfully, everybody who's here knows what's going on in the digital health world at large. We don't need to start at that point. But there's clearly been a lot of growth in the ecosystem, and there's been a lot of growth in collaborations. And we really built tonight's event around this report that we're putting out that each of you will also have full access to in just a moment, as well as better understanding how to grow and move on from there. So let's jump straight in. Imagine Bio, for those of you who don't know us, is a consulting organization based here in Israel, totally focused on healthcare innovation, and in particular around building successful collaborations between healthcare leaders from around the world and Israeli startups, which of course there are very many. Beyond the introduction of forces, which I think is the easy part of the work, so many of these collaborations are difficult to build because in the digital health world, there may be 600 digital health startups in Israel. But I point out quite often there's not 600 digital health corporates in the world. There are primarily pharma, medical device, healthcare providers, and payers. And if you're a startup, you need to better understand how do you work within those parameters and those business models. And with the growth of outcome-based payment, so how do you fit into that mold? In the US market, over a quarter of providers are already at risk for more than half of their payments. And that's increasingly shifting to other sectors of the market from medical device, which are increasingly being bundled and being paid for value, to even now we're beginning to see a little bit of that in the pharma world. Thankfully, as this graph points out, a lot of the growth in healthcare expenditures can be attributed to administration. And as we'll see, a lot of the opportunities in the ecosystem are right there with building business models to address those hurdles of administration. So from a global perspective, we clearly see 2020 was a massive year in funding. These numbers are coming to us from Startup Health on a global basis. And we see that 2020 was indeed almost double what was happening in 2019. On the Israel side of that, we see consistently Israel is ending up in the top hubs. We brought together data from Startup Health on the global side and using Israel Venture Capital's database for the Israel side. And as we see here, clearly the US remains by far the hub, major global hub of innovation. But behind the US hubs, Israel is literally the next biggest one, both by deal count, both by investment dollars, and certainly by concentration. For those of you who are here in Israel, of course, you know that Israel is one ecosystem, not Haifa, Tel Aviv, Jerusalem. For those of you who don't, it really is a 1 hour radius from any of these cities to the other. And so the ecosystem is very much global. And we see that year after year that's consistent in the deal count. Year by year, from an Israel perspective, we see, unfortunately, there was actually a small drop this year. We were seeing that up until Q3, we were actually on track for an outstanding year that would have even peaked 2019. But for whatever reason, the deal count slowed down in Q4. We ended up just short of that. So, but we're already seeing some big deals that have been announced just in the beginning of January. So we'll allow the analysis to stay dynamic. It could be that some deals haven't been announced yet and will come forward. The deal flow that's making a lot of this happen, you mentioned the number over 600 earlier. That's a dynamic number. Clearly, we're seeing a lot of new startups in the ecosystem. But particularly this year, what we're seeing more and more of is not just startups that are getting more scale-up funding and scale-up implementation in global markets, particularly in Israel. Of course, we'll focus on the US, the European market, and increasingly the Japanese market. But also we're seeing new startups. It was a difficult year. COVID made it a difficult year. We're all here virtually instead of in person like we prefer to be. So it's a difficult year to start a new startup. That being said, we see a number of startups successfully getting initial funding this year. I just point to Alike on the patient engagement side. That's a new startup, and it's part of a trend that we're seeing in seasoned folks, seasoned executives from the ecosystem getting more involved and clearly having the weight to pull off funding even from the ideation stage. So we're very excited to see how that's going to continue on. While we talk a lot about investment funding, I see very little talked about when it comes to, well, does it mean anything? Is the market giving any of this value? So we took a look back, not just at this year, but on M&As and IPOs from Israeli digital health companies over the last, what ended up being about 15 years, right? So if we look at companies like American Well, which went IPO this year, that's not a new company at all. Telehealth's been around for a good 2 decades. They've been part of that, right? But there's also been acquisitions like DB Motion and others dating back as many as 15 years. And we're super excited to say, hey, look, there's $10 billion in deal value here. And we use the deal value at acquisition. So many of these are actually quite higher than this now if they're IPOs or part of big companies where we can't figure out exactly what it's driving in the bottom line. I think that's an important thing to point out, that as the digital health ecosystem matures, that there's actually real value that's being attributed to the end users here. So let's take a deep dive into some of the trends. We're not going to have a chance to cover everything for lack of time, but just on a high end, there's more startups. Many of those are scaling up. That's clearly attributable to what's going on in COVID. There's a lot more implementation now. We went from things as simple as telehealth having marginalized use in global markets to now every major provider has a telehealth solution plugged in. Some of them are using them now mainstream, and others we saw past the initial lockdowns beginning to kind of pare down and going back to in-person visits. But what's very clear is not only is the amount of implementation coming in strong, but it's allowing for more interest in what were before kind of niche opportunities. And that's amazing. Some of the deals are finally getting paid based off of value. We've been talking a lot about value-based care in the last many years. But when it comes to the startups, I don't know who in the room has thought to themselves, well, are they actually getting paid for value? Or at the end of the day, are they still selling their services bundled for payment one by one? And the answer up until now has been the latter, but we're beginning to actually see, and I can't disclose all of these in a public forum, but we're beginning to see more and more startups saying, actually, some of them are actually getting paid for value. So they're discounting up front, but taking part of the value that they're creating. And on this other side of it is many are selling out to intermediaries. The startups are recognizing that the way to the end markets implies that you need to work through intermediaries. Many healthcare IT companies who play that role, and they're being bundled up in services that are ultimately being delivered to healthcare providers and payers at value-based pay scale. So that's excellent, and we expect to see more of that. Maybe some of our panelists will discuss their experience with that as well. The growth of the local digital health ecosystem has given lots of opportunities for more MNCs and more VCs to get involved, and we'll take a deep dive into that in a second. So let's just jump into some of these one by one. So I mentioned the startups are maturing. So when we break down the stage by funding on the left side here, or the stage by product, we see over 200 companies are at Series A or beyond or revenue financing. But there's many that are really actually running their companies today based on the revenue that they are bringing in. Sometimes we look down on revenue in the startup world, but at the end of the day, that's actually a pretty strong indicator that there is value. Somebody's willing to pay for this service, not just to invest in the dream. And on the product side, and this is very important when we're looking at collaborations, over 250 companies from that group of 600 are post proof of concept. That we've defined that as they've deployed with at least one end user. So that means that there's plenty of opportunity for collaboration with companies that have products that are ready to go. And we expect that to continue to grow in the year to come. So a lot of the players are clearly involved in AI. So beyond AI buzz, that's also driving business models for real world impact. And when we saw folks like Medial and their work with Maccabi from years back get into the market, there's a lot of buzz for those who know the team behind that around AI. But now we're seeing that's approved in the US market, approved in the UK market, and being deployed there. And the reasons that some of these technologies were invented in Israel is not always the same reason that they are deployed in end markets around the world. But the reality is that as the ecosystem matures, it's ever more important to understand what's the use case, segmented by geography, segmented by sector, whether you're aiming for a pharma player, whether you're aiming for healthcare providers and beyond, you need to understand what's their specific use case. All too often, when we're discussing potential opportunities between startups and global players, the startup says, hey, here's an amazing technology we've developed. Look how it helps the patient do X, Y, Z. That's great. But what about the value? How does that create value for the pharma? How does that create value for the healthcare provider? Because yes, we understand everybody needs to get paid, but let's make sure that everybody has value that they can build off of that in order to make it work. So that's a business model question. It's more and more important as we look to roll of scale-ups. On the side of multinationals, there's been plenty of interest in Israel over the last 7 years of the digital health world, but clearly we're seeing more and more players get involved who weren't before. I'll point to healthcare providers and payers who I think were the last to get involved in this space. If we think historically, providers aren't looking to Israel as a market. Okay, we love the space we live in here, but 9 million people is not an attractive market from those players. On the other hand, when you look for innovation, and healthcare providers recognize and payers increasingly recognize they've probably got the most to gain from digital health innovation. And if Israel is such a hub, so they've become increasingly active here. Anthem, as many of you know, launched their first international hub in Israel back in 2019. And it's clearly a lot more than just talk. They've become very involved, very much publicizing their collaborations that they've launched from here, but as well as doing real R&D work with their group here in Israel. United Health, clearly the biggest payer in the US market, just announced a couple of weeks ago that they're acquiring Change Healthcare. Up until now, they've not been a major player here. And now we see Change Healthcare, which has a team of over 100 R&D people over here in Holon in Israel, is now going to have a team of 100 as part of United. So we can expect big things to continue to grow there. Some of the players we have later in the panel, like Bayer and Roche, have gotten more involved and announced big opportunities that they're pursuing over the last year as well. So we're seeing folks really double down and recognize there's something interesting here, and how they're doing it. Let's take a look at that here in a second. Look at just a couple of examples, and these clearly are just examples and not more than that. Switch and Bayer, we'll hear maybe a little bit from them later on, but here's a pharmaceutical company who recognizes that they want to and need to bring more value to their patients beyond the pills that they're doing, beyond the medicine that they're delivering. Switch, which is a patient engagement platform, or if you define it according to some others, perhaps a digital therapeutic, enables that. And we saw them announce a pretty cool partnership earlier on. K Health, which came out of Maccabi, is using AI to triage patients. That's amazing. If you can't see patients as much and as personal as you did before now, how important is it now to help guide your patients as they're understanding, do I need to go to my family doctor? Do I need to go to a specialist? Maybe I can avoid seeing a doctor in general. So we'll see exactly in what ways Anthem ends up deploying that relationship that they've already been deploying in target markets. And we'll hear more from Roche in day two's deployment of their microbiome-based personalized dietary recommendations. But clearly, you're seeing here there's digital, there's a major player in the market that understands what they're looking for. And they're not just talking about opportunities, they're not just investing in the startups. They're saying, hey, we need to use these to grow our business and to address opportunities in the market. The FDA guidance couldn't be more important here. So on one hand, FDA is a cog and a barrier to more deployment. On the other hand, as they put out more and more guidance for how they're going to regulate digital health and digital therapeutics, there's really allowing more folks to be comfortable with deployment, understanding what the legality of their services are, and therefore aligning what they're delivering with new motives. And of course, from a business perspective, regulation in healthcare is ever so important when it comes to creating moats around your technology. So to the extent that folks are ready to bring more clinical outcomes and more clinical validation of their services from the digital world, the more they'll be able to use new regulatory pathways to create moats around that for themselves. In the startup world, VC funding is how we pay the bills. So not only is there more funding on a global level coming into Israel, but there's more local VCs that just in the last year announced either new funds or whole new VCs. And that's very exciting. That's $2.3 billion invested just in the last 3 years in Israel. And new players who have deep expertise in this space is very important. Up until about 2-3 years ago, we didn't see many local funds investing in the scale-up stage, and that's clearly changing now. Folks like HolloTree and Amoon and Arcrown, just to point to some big thumbs up to them, they've really put more and more funding behind the scale-up companies, and that's very important. So as part of this report that we put together, we interviewed over 30 multinational companies who are active in the innovation ecosystem here in Israel. And we asked them all kinds of questions, guaranteeing, of course, their confidentiality, to understand what are they doing here, how can they do it more effectively, and what direction are they going. So let's take a quick look through some of these. We see that amongst many of the companies here, they're involved in directly investing into companies, doing pilots with companies, doing R&D with Israeli-based institutions like hospitals and HMOs. But across the board, 75% of those we surveyed said they plan to increase their Israel-based innovation and collaborations and investments in the years to come. So huge vote in favor, not just of we're here, we're doing it, but actually that we're planning to do more. Looking at the subsectors that they're all involved in, very much across the board. We see remote monitoring, patient engagement, monitoring and devices in Israel happens to be one of the big areas where we see so many different types of startup technologies. And thankfully, there's alignment there between what's in the market, and especially now with more remote deployment with COVID, there's interest literally from across the board from every type of company in using and deploying more of those solutions. A common question we've thought about from a collaboration point of view is, well, how often is this happening? So we asked companies, how many pilots or proof of concepts with Israel-related digital health startups are they doing in 2020? And you see here quite the spectrum, but pretty much we're seeing most companies are doing between 5 to 10, and there's a huge opportunity there. That means if you know who the players in the market are, they're looking for opportunities, they are active, and they're deploying it. The question that follows from that, though, is who's doing more than piloting? And this is a tough question, one that we're going to delve into now as we move beyond the report, is from piloting to scale up. And the question that we asked is, looking on a global level, not just Israel, how many of the pilots that your company did that met the KPIs? And we define the question as pilots that met the KPIs, the key performance indicators that you defined. How many of them went on to scale? And in most cases, less than a quarter did so. And so then we asked a follow-up question. What were the main reasons that those pilots failed to scale up from your own prerogative? And we see there market hurdles and business models overwhelmingly. We let folks pick their top 3, by the way. So market hurdles and business models, insufficient support from corporate decision makers, and pilot study limitations were the main factors involved. Notice that only further down the list were product limitations, i.e. technology identified. So here's a recognition we all need to think a little bit more about. If you're a startup and there's death by pilot, as we say, or if you're a multinational, you're actually running innovation in your company, how can we actually deliver more results? Innovation is sexy, pilots are sexy, but we want to drive the business from both sides. So hopefully we can look a little bit deeper on that. And we'll dive more into that later. Just flash this link up for you, and maybe the moderators can put this into the chat board as well. Anybody wants to download the full report, we welcome you to. We're giving everybody a sneak access here before we post it live. And there's Grant for Apps program, which is their digital health global program, and is joining us from Berlin. So Dom, thank you very much. And Jakob Bubis, who is the VP of Strategic Alliances at Medtronic, and also the leader for their Jerusalem R&D site. We're very excited to speak a little bit more about what their perspectives are on building better and more effective collaborations. So maybe, Dom, I can hand it over to you to give a little bit more background on yourself and what you're doing at Bayer.
Yeah, sure. Thanks so much, Ilya. So a little in terms of background, I've been in digital health for about 15 years. I'm from the United States. I'm from Washington, D.C. I am based in Berlin, Germany. My background in digital health really started at a company in the US called Revolution Health, started by Steve Case, who many know for starting America Online, later the America Online Time Warner merger. With Steve, I worked at Revolution Health for about 3 years, doing corporate development, strategic partnerships. Found my way a little bit through serendipity to Germany in 2010. Played between US and Germany until 2013 when I officially joined Bayer. Since being at Bayer, I've done global communications. I've been a part of our global health policy team and recently heading up G4A. I also have a background in healthcare investment banking and finance.
Cool. Thanks so much, Tom. Jakob, can you give us some background on yourself and what you're up to at Medtronic?
Yes, so actually I've been one of the founders of Oridion Medical, an Israeli company dealing with respiratory monitoring some 33 years ago. And through that, you know, the company was acquired by Covidien and then Covidien by Medtronic. So I'm still, I'm one of those unique cases that I'm still here with the same company basically, but evolved through the years. So right now I'm in charge of, is there background noise from my microphone?
We hear
no?
you.
Okay. So my role now is actually to create strategic alliances between my operating unit, the patient monitoring operating unit at Medtronic, with medical device manufacturers worldwide. And I run the manufacturing and R&D sites both in Jerusalem and in Petah Tikva for Medtronic.
Awesome, awesome. So thank you for that very much. So I pointed out earlier at the end of the presentation, the 3 most common hurdles that our survey revealed. And of course, what we're really alluding to here is that the technology is amazing. We're seeing more and more great technology, not just in Israel, but on a global level. And it's a global world. So from an Israel perspective, we may have great things here, but we're in a competition, and a good one, with many great leaders from around the world. The business models are questions. Building more effective collaborations with the corporates, bringing in the right stakeholders is a question, and the limitations of those pilots. Those are the 3 most common ones. So let's maybe start at the top one there, which is business models. What's going on here? How have these matured? How can we do more to address this hurdle? Dom, can I let you give some background and some ideas here?
Yeah, I mean, you know, you mentioned business models, and when I saw those 3, I kind of see, for me, the common thread is normally really about people. And so what I mean is that, I mean, the business models are one thing, but I think especially for a traditional biopharmaceutical person, understanding a digital health business model is a little bit of a square peg in a round hole. And so, there normally has to be a lot of education done up front for someone to even understand the scalable opportunities for a digital health business. I think what's also really important in the biopharmaceutical industry is that when you talk about digital, you have people across the entire value chain that see digital in very distinct and different ways. You have your clinical R&D people that see digital one way. You kind of have your sales people that see your sales and marketing people that see digital a completely different way. You have your medical team that sees digital functioning in another completely different way. And so in many of our companies, it's very rare to have one person that can navigate or that can kind of control all of those different processes and views and manage them in one place. And so, business models is one thing, but it's really the people that can understand the business models. Part of what we're trying to do at Bayer and what's really unique about our approach is that we have a business center group at Bayer called Integrated Care. So we really are looking at digital health solutions beyond the pill. When people think about biopharmaceutical companies, what they're normally thinking about is, oh, Bayer wants a digital pill companion. That's not the case at all. When you mentioned Switch in your presentation, which maybe we'll talk about a little bit later, but we really are looking at behavioral change platforms that actually touch people, which we don't even like to refer to as patients, but actual people again.
That's awesome. Pharma is not a new business whatsoever. Pharmaceutical companies have really succeeded in creating strong clinical results with new products, whether it's chemicals, biologics, or beyond, and showing the value of that deserves payment, whether it's direct to consumers. Bayer's famous for aspirin at the end of the day, or more prescription drugs. So the question for a pharma company, so very nice that, let's say, Switch can engage a patient and help them eat more healthy or stick to adherence to their drugs. Is that enough? Is adherence to drugs, if that moves from 70% to 80%, is that enough of a business? Or what else can we look at if we're speaking with Bayer or another pharma company when we think about value for the necessary stakeholders?
Right. So let's kind of pull that conversation out a little bit, because I think before you get into, how the digital therapeutic actually impacts, through adherence or something like that, you have to kind of think about the drivers. And what we see are these kind of intersecting drivers that you pretty much alluded to. But the way we look through that is through, I think, 3 different vertical pillars, if you will. You have the artificial intelligence layer. You mentioned the FDA, so you also have this public policy layer. And then what's really controlling the outcomes is what's on the front end, the social determinants of health. And social determinants of health have to do with everything related to how you're educated, how you eat. The number one predictor of health and healthcare is your zip code. And then what we already saw over kind of integrating with that pre-COVID, you had NCDs, you had healthy aging, and then you had healthcare spending. What we saw kind of happen post-COVID or in the middle of COVID, you saw these really big microscopes or lenses being put on NCDs and healthy aging. The fact that if you have an NCD, all of a sudden you're at greater risk. If you're old, all of a sudden you're at greater risk. And then what we've seen really through the venture capital lens that you mentioned, Ilya, is that we have the conversation has gone completely from healthcare spending to healthcare investing. And so to even get to adherence, you have to kind of understand what has, I think, happened a little bit for us, and for really, I think, some of the data that I've seen over the last year. When you talk about just an adherence vertical, that's not enough. What we're looking at, again, is behavioral change. And so a lot of this science comes out of Stanford, and there's actually this book called Tiny Habits by this guy named BJ Fogg. And when we look at a company like Switch, it really kind of embraces that entire package, if you will, to where it's not just the outcomes relate to what's on the front end. Again, to your social determinants of health. Like if I have Switch will tell me, oh, well, Dom, if you take this longer route, home, you'll reach your step count, And so those kind of outcomes, and when you talk about value-based care, those are the kind of outcomes that we're really looking for. Adherence, I think, is a very narrow vertical. And we have a little bit of a broader view at Bayer.
So how important is it for a startup to, when they're approaching you initially, to have a clear sense of what value they're going to bring to the stakeholders, or how much of that is a natural evolution of the relationship?
It's a two-way street. I think, again, most companies, they think of us as especially when it comes to digital, as a traditional biopharma. I have, my inbox or my LinkedIn is full of people that want to give us an AI solution for our clinical trials, or remote patient monitoring. And again, we're at a different part of the value chain at G4A. We want actual solutions that connect with people. If you look at some of the earlier companies that we've worked with, so in November we announced Sweech, but we announced two earlier companies. One named Caria, which is a platform for women's health and menopause, and another named Ellie, which is an audio companion, mostly around cancer right now, or oncology. And the conversation that we're having with them is a little bit about reimagining, the biopharmaceutical model, and again, this value proposition that you mentioned, in part because, and this gets back to your original question, Ilya, and the people are one thing, and the people in our companies change quite a bit. So you have to have a value story that can connect with a lot of people over time, especially if you're looking for a deep, meaningful kind of a partnership or scalable opportunity with a biopharma.
That's awesome. Jakob, do you want to weigh in there, or should we move over to the next question?
I think the main thing I will say is that building these relationships gradually usually is helpful. You start with sometimes with a limited collaboration to get to know each other, and that leads to this dialogue that Dominic was talking about, that can develop into much bigger things. So in many cases, this starting with a smaller scale and just scaling up is very useful, that you get to know both sides.
Cool. So Medtronic is not a secret of being the most active acquirer in the Israeli ecosystem, and that didn't just happen over the last year. But when we're speaking about the second biggest challenge, which is bringing in the right stakeholders, clearly you don't just make an acquisition and forget about that company. There's a lot that needs to happen to lead up to an acquisition, with getting the right stakeholders involved, and there's a lot more that needs to happen afterwards. Can you give us some insights on how you can go about doing that from both sides of the board?
So actually, one interesting thing that I say is that, before the acquisition, your company, your startup is like a prospect, there's, this huge dream about it and so on. The minute after it was acquired, it sort of also becomes a liability. And then, all the functions of this big company are looking at what this small company is doing, and they see only all the risks that could be. And especially if you take digital health, which is something that not everyone is familiar with, then people, even it can be bigger. So one of the main success factors for those acquisitions is to really have a great sponsor in, like, an integration manager and their leaders, but also to really focus on what's the value that the multinational was trying to achieve with this acquisition. And usually the value is a great technology, but also a team that is faster than the multinational, that can get things done quicker, and so on. And really to protect that culture, to integrate to the big company, protecting that culture. And that's really a challenge. And when I was being integrated into Covidien and Medtronic, one of my biggest roles was to really to make sure that every time and then people would say Medtronic wants this, and my question would be, who's Mr. Medtronic? Tell me who's Mr. Medtronic, and tell me why he wants to do this to you. And then really to realize if this is something that is being done to check a checklist, or to bring the value that we are here to provide. So that is really a key learning for me. And I see that, you know, in the Medtronic acquisitions that were done, you know, since, you know, the company I was in, Iridium, was acquired, and then Given Imaging, and then Neutrino and Mazor and Vision Sense. In all of those, you know, we've been able to maintain that. And I'm sure, you know, Yael is going to be here later, so she can talk about Neutrino directly. But really, that is something of paramount importance.
Very cool. Would you say that there's a difference in when a startup should approach somebody in a business unit or in R&D, or is the best point of contact at an innovation head of some sort? Does it make a difference, and is that a different value proposition?
I think it really depends on the company, on the way it's structured. You know, I can give you the example of Medtronic that, you know, is going through a big organizational change. And now, you know, we have operating units that have been empowered to make more decisions. So right now, the right address would be the operating unit and, you know, the business development team of that operating unit. Whilst a month ago, it was going to be, you know, the divisions and so on. So really, you have to get some intelligence, learn how this company, how the investments are done in this company, and understand. But clearly, if you come with a business proposition, you have to go to that business that, you know, that it will affect. Because, you know, companies are trying to, you know, to grow their market share and grow their penetration. So those that are tasked with growing, you know, a certain market are going to be your best audience.
That's awesome. All right, guys, thank you so much for all those insights. Before we go to the next section, I'll just give everybody a heads up that at the end here, in about 40 minutes when we finish up the speakers and case studies, we're going to have breakout rooms. So I appreciate Dom and Jakob joining us for the event, and they'll each get a breakout room that if you want to come say hi and maybe network a little bit. So you'll have an opportunity there. So thank you both.
For presentation of the first case study, I would like to invite Ms. Yael Glassman, Vice President Neutrino of Medtronic Diabetes Group at Medtronic, and previously the CEO of Neutrino Health, and also Mr. Eric Wolf, Vice President of Business Development and Strategy of the Global Diabetes Group at Medtronic. Thank you, Yael and Eric. And before I ask you about the practice of the collaborations, please let me share with our audience its background. So Medtronic is a known global leader in medical technology, and it acquired Neutrino Health, a personalized nutrition data company, in December 2018, following the company's 2 years commercial relationship. Given that food and nutrition are central components in effective diabetes management, the companies recognize an opportunity to improve clinical outcomes for people with diabetes by integrating Neutrino's extensive food analysis infrastructure, nutrition science expertise, and AI-driven personalized insight with Medtronic technology and future innovations. And further, Medtronic also received breakthrough device designation from the US FDA for its personalized closed-loop insulin pump system. Currently, it's in development. This technology is designed to automate insulin delivery in the way that is real-time, personalized, and adapt to the user. The system will also provide insights and predictive diagnostics that are unique to the individual, with a goal of dramatically simplifying diabetes management for the patient. The acquisition of Neutrino Health and their expertise in nutrition data science is expected to play a key role in the accelerated development of this breakthrough technology. So we are going to focus on the 2 years of collaboration between Neutrino and Medtronic that were prior to the acquisition. Okay. So Yael, I would like to ask you first about the initiation phase. What were the points of contact? How did you in Neutrino evaluated relevant collaborators? How did it all begin?
Okay, thanks. It's great to be here. Thanks for having me. And good to be speaking right after Yaakov, because indeed he covered a lot in his first piece. So happy to be here. As you know, Neutrino was acquired 2 years ago, and prior to that, 2 years before that, we were partners with Medtronic. How did it all start? So we, at Neutrino, we developed a personalized nutrition data company, and we made the decision early on to make our market focus in diabetes. And essentially, one of the things that we were looking for was we were looking for a partner in the continuous glucose monitoring area, because we needed that data input for our research and for our work. And we seeked, there were 3 companies, Abbott, Dexcom, and Medtronic, that had these technologies out there. Some of these companies were offering access to their data without any kind of special collaboration. Dexcom had published or allowed the data to be accessed through Apple HealthKit, and Medtronic and Abbott had closed systems at the time when we were looking. We basically reached out to all of these 3 players through personal connections, and got to the diabetes group, to the folks that were really running these programs. I think the thing that we did before that, though, is I think Yaakov noted that, and I'm sure Eric will speak to it as well. When we emailed Medtronic and got to the right person through personal contacts that we had, we didn't just show up in the meeting and say, hey, we have this cool technology. Would you like to see it? We actually had a view as to what we thought Medtronic could gain by leveraging our technology. And we also had a very, I would say, humble ask. The only thing we asked for was for a small pilot with our ability to use their data together with our data in order to demonstrate our capabilities. And so we were able to secure, within 6 months, we were able to secure a pilot that took our technology together with the insulin pump over 2,000 patients and deployed it very quickly and launched. And essentially, we were able to demonstrate what we could do together without really asking Medtronic for much at the beginning. I think one of the things to note is that when you're working with big players, it's hard for them to give much in the beginning. As Yaakov said, it takes a lot of people, there's lots of points of contact, and the more you can do on your own, the easier it will be. And then following that successful pilot, we published together with Medtronic at the American Diabetes Association, we had a poster. They saw the results. We also developed this rapport with the management team, and we were able to move forward to a larger commercial agreement that was a 5-year agreement. And we can talk further about that, but that's how it all started.
Many thanks. So, Eric, can you, refer to this question about the way that you evaluated in Medtronic relevant collaborators such as Neutrino?
Yeah, happy to. So first of all, hello to my friend Yaakov. I'm so happy to see you. You have more facial hair than I remember, but you look healthy and great as always. So it's great to see you, my friend. No, listen, we and a lot of this has been, covered in prior discussions, but, Yael nailed it. For us, a lot of it is, doing the work early as a startup for the big company, helping them think through sort of where does this fit, what market are we going after? And then when, if you need an investment or there's some sort of a security involved, you're going through, additional sort of layers of complexity within, a big corporation to get that relationship inked. So the first thing we look for is, great technology, great people we trust, early demonstrable results. Really what happened with Neutrino and Yael being extremely humble is we realized really quickly into this pilot what they had within their organization and the secret sauce they had. And it was, the founders of the organization, it was pretty much every single employee was working and contributing that 200%. I mean, they had very, very lean, very smart team, and they got work done for not a lot of money. And so where we were is we kind of woke up one day as we were looking at this pilot, and said, we have to own this team. It was almost what you read about in the newspaper, these acqui-hires where you're getting, you know, the technology and you're getting all of these assets, but it was really the people. I know, great anecdotal story. I own the founding group, and I became extremely close through our interactions over, you know, it was probably about a year before we began M&A negotiations. And for whatever reason, I had to be in Luxembourg for work. I don't know, I'm sure you remember this well. And we're just in sort of these mid-level negotiations on price and sort of what does the acquisition look like, and it's moving relatively quickly. And I asked if she wanted with the founders to join me for dinner in Luxembourg. And so we sat down at a phenomenal restaurant, and I think within the first 15 to 20 minutes, we hashed out the remaining open items on the acquisition. And we opened a bottle of champagne and enjoyed sort of what the future was going to look like together. And so, you know, in your preamble, when you were going through, you know, sort of where does Neutrino fit today, the really beautiful thing about Neutrino is not only are we using, you know, the team and the technology to feed into the personalized closed loop pipeline, but we've also made additional acquisitions that are going to augment Neutrino. You know, Companion Medical, which is a smart pen company. We also acquired a company called Clue, which is doing hand gesture recognition for eating confirmation. And then the really cool part is the Neutrino team is being leveraged beyond just the diabetes team as a real innovation and thought hub across broader Medtronic. So Yael, you might want to talk about that a little bit and give some more specificity, but it's a really cool commitment that Medtronic has made to the acquisition. You know, it's what Yakov said, there's multiple acquisitions where, you know, the technology kind of just gets gobbled up, and Mr. Medtronic comes in and, you know, raises all of these caution flags in the new company as part of the integration. But Neutrino's one, you know, they were not in Medtronic's quality system, and Yael, maybe you can talk a little bit about the integration aspect of it as well. But it's been a you know, super tremendous partnership now for 2 years and going.
And so speaking about this partnership, this amazing partnership, could you please describe the best practices of such collaboration between a startup and, you know, and a leading global company? Or, like, in other words, how did it actually work?
Do you want me to take that, Eric?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
go for it.
So I'd say one thing, though, to keep in mind is when you're trying to approach big Medtronic or big Bayer or whoever, it's not, as Yakov said, there's many, many people. And one of the things that was difficult for us in the beginning, and Eric remembers this is another dinner at JP Morgan many years ago, where in order to get anything done beyond the pilot, we had to talk to 10 people at any given moment in time, and no one had the authority to make any decision until you got to the EVP level. And that's tough. And I think sometimes going into these conversations with multinationals, especially in healthcare, if you think that it's going to go fast, you're going to be really, really disappointed. I think I had spent a lot of time previous to this working with large healthcare systems in the United States, working with payers. And so I knew the 12 to 18 month sales cycle that I was going into. And so I wasn't really expecting that it would go quickly, but I think what needed to be done is we ended up having 3 different agreements within the diabetes group initially. One with the insulin pump group, one with the CGM group, one with the type 2 group. And it was only when they realized through Eric's help that we actually needed to do some sort of consolidation that we were able to strike beyond the pilot a pan-diabetes agreement, which was not easy to pull together, where we said, I remember saying to Eric, if you want to buy this 3 times, I'm happy to sell this to you 3 times, but you might just want to buy it once and we might have a bigger collaboration. So herding the cats, I think, is not always easy. I think though, so being able to understand who actually has the power, who's gonna really need to be in the room in order to make decisions, being able to tell the story 50 times if you need to different people in the organization in the way that they need to hear it respectfully, is also part of the story. And I would say when we came in, we thought that we were going to go into the type 2 groups and do most of the effort on pre-diabetes, et cetera. It was only through collaborating with the diabetes team that we really understood that most of our true value, where we could accelerate true product introduction, was on the pump side and on the very, very specific side of artificial pancreas. We didn't even know that we could have any value there in the beginning. So it was very, I think, collaborative that was. The other thing I wanted to mention is that we are a data company. We were a data company. We were the first software company that Medtronic bought. And that wasn't always that in the beginning. That was also another challenge, because Medtronic is used to evaluating med tech companies under a very specific set of criteria, and we had a different story to tell. But the other thing I would say to my fellow startups here is that Medtronic, as you said, someone said in the beginning, is very acquisitive, but Medtronic is also very deal oriented, not just on the acquisition side, also on the BD side. And Medtronic is also very pro-Israel on the BD side. I would say that makes it easier because the people you meet on the other side are actually very transaction oriented. And we ended up having commercial relationships with many other companies until we got acquired. But I think that some companies are better than others at this process. And for startups, if you enter the negotiation with multiple companies, which is what you end up doing, not for M&A, but for commercial relationships, if these are not companies that are very deal oriented or able to move and focus on the transaction, it takes a lot of time for the CEO and for the rest of the company to manage that. And so it's one of the things to try and maybe seek out is how realistic is it that you're actually going to do a deal with this company, and how fast? Because time is I said to the first person I met at Medtronic, the woman who got me in the door, I told her, for me, a year is a lifetime. For you, it's 4 quarters, but for us, it's the difference between living and dying. And so I think that's another piece I think Medtronic really is uniquely good at doing the BD part. And I think that's important for startups to know, because it just increases the chance that you'll actually be able to have an agreement.
Thanks, Yael. Well, Eric, Yael mentioned the challenges in being the first data company that was acquired by Medtronic. I would like to ask you about the business model of the collaboration. So without going into details, can you give us a sense of the value of this collaboration with a data company for each company?
Yeah, so it was actually probably the hardest part of my job, frankly, was helping folks understand what it is we're actually acquiring and what does it do and how do we arrive at evaluation. And that took, and a lot of these conversations sound bureaucratic. It's not as bureaucratic as I'm making it sound. We have regular every 3-week merger and acquisition meetings with our entire executive team where we go through everything that's active. And as Yael and I were going through the diligence and the negotiation, I'm having these conversations with our CEO and the executive team at Medtronic. And for us, it's different if you're taking a look at a market and you're buying a technology that, is either complementary or supplementary to something you have internally, and arriving at evaluation. Here, that was absolutely the biggest struggle. And so what we had to educate our executive leadership team on was, one is they're just bringing completely unique capabilities to what we're trying to do in our personalized closed looping pumping system that we just can't do, right? So it's the food database and the insights and the AI aspects of it and all of that we were acquiring from Nutrino, we did not full stop have the capabilities in-house. So that's sort of bucket one, is we just have to educate that, like, if you want to leapfrog and stay in a leadership position on the pump side, we have to have this innovation. The other piece that I spent a good amount of time on is educating on the fact that it's going to pull in timelines, right? So not only are you going to get a differentiated offering, but you've got timelines that you need to pull that will be able to be pulled in pretty meaningfully, and there's going to be revenue and all of that associated with it. And then the biggest thing, just to be honest here, was really being proactive on thinking about retention. So the last thing we wanted to do was acquire Neutrino and have, you know, the three founders leave the next day. We wanted folks, you know, committed to the vision. A lot of work needed to be done. We were picking Neutrino up sort of midstream in the partnership. And so we wanted to ensure that incentives were aligned between both organizations to stay on that journey. And so, you know, if I had answered your previous question that you asked, Yael, I would have said it's trust and alignment around vision. You know, for us, that was absolutely critical. I mean, we had absolutely 100% transparent conversations all along the way. And as our vision kind of matured, even informed by Neutrino, I think we probably, I don't want to speak for you and the team, but I think we got ourselves really excited on what the future was going to look like together. And that made kind of all the details a heck of a lot easier.
Okay, thank you. So, and this would be the last question that I will ask you. Well, I've seen a quotation of Mr. Hakimi from Medtronic, which says that the Neutrino team has been an outstanding partner over the past few years to work with. So my question would be to both of you, and please answer me in one sentence. You could do that. So could you summarize what made this collaboration so successful? So yes,
I'll go first. I'll go first.
Yeah, okay.
It's what I just said. It's trust and alignment around vision. I think if you don't trust yourself, if you don't trust each other on the other side, and you're not crystal clear about where we're all going together, and there's big surprises after you close, it's a recipe for disaster. And we built, you know, strong personal relationships early on, where we could, you know, there were aspects of the deal I didn't have an answer for, and Yael and the team just understood that, and we continue to kind of power through things. And if we didn't have that personal relationship and trust, I don't think we would have moved as quickly as we did, and you know, have had such a prosperous partnership.
If I could add, I would say, in addition to trust, I think we had respect, but I also think there was, in addition to respect, there was true fit. And what I mean by that is it's not a surprise that Neutrino now goes beyond diabetes, or as our new CEO just said, Neutrino is now really a platform for Medtronic. And that's, you know, oftentimes in M&A deals, you say that's going to happen. You're going to go beyond the business unit that bought you, but here we actually are doing that. And the reason is that we did bring a capability that Medtronic actually needed. They didn't know exactly what they needed it for, but they knew that they needed it. And we were able to come in and leverage it across the business. We're doing work with Spine, we're doing work with other groups. And I would say the other thing that that really made it possible was that we respected the big organization, and the big organization respected us. They let us, I would say, we were left alone in the integration. You asked about the integration. They let us run our day-to-day. We stayed in the same offices. We kept our team. I got to maintain my team and run as usual. We did not get, 50 million folks on our head. We had a separate budget. And I think that also goes to trust, because it's not that we did not treat the big corporation with respect. We went through the quality management process. We even got an award for our quality management work. But they looked to us. I think they used us correctly. They saw what we could do, and they played. Let us play our part in the orchestra. But we also understood that we were part of an orchestra, and we understood that we're part of a big organization. So I think the personal relationships, the respect, and the fact that each party knew what role they're playing. And I think at the end of the day also, we really had what we said we had. And I think that, you know, we weren't just selling pipe dreams. We actually had the things we were telling Medtronic that we had. And I think in the 2-year commercial relationship, Medtronic was able to kick the tires and see. And we've been able to realize that in the actual collaboration. I think it's been very successful for everyone involved. And I would say lastly, you know, we didn't want to just sell the company. We wanted to actually be part of a meaningful trajectory for the work that we did. And when you think about, you know, nutrition data and nutrition science directing therapy, being able to actually having algorithms drive titration of insulin into people is a pretty big success story. And I think for our team, it was really important that we weren't going to turn into some diet company or no disrespect to dieting. For us, we were very excited to be able to be so core into this therapy direction. And Medtronic is going into the world of data-enabled therapy very aggressively. And Israel is a hub for that, not just us, but others. And I think we're very happy to be part of that.
Many thanks, Yael. Many thanks, Eric, for this inspiring ideas and for your sharing with us your experience. I would like to invite our partner, Mr. Stephen Collins, the CEO at Metrics, to present the next case study. Thank you, Yael and Eric.
Thanks so much. Really appreciate the opportunity to be here and to partner with you and with Imagine Bio and on the work that you're doing. So just a little bit of background on Matter. We are a healthcare incubator and an innovation hub, really built on a belief that collaboration between entrepreneurs and industry leaders is the best way to develop healthcare solutions. We do 3 things kind of in service of our mission. So the first is we incubate startups. We launched about 6 years ago, and we've worked with more than 500 companies. They range from very early stage to growth stage, and we have a suite of services to help them grow. Second, we're a nexus for people who are passionate about healthcare innovation. We bring people together to be inspired and learn and connect with each other and produce a lot of programs to that effect, including large-scale events for the broader community and small forums that are really exclusive to our members and our partners. And the third thing is we work with large organizations, health systems, life sciences companies, insurance companies, to help them achieve their innovation goals. We've worked with 130 established organizations since we launched, helping them source and co-develop solutions, think through complex challenges, and then we have some training capabilities as well to help them innovate better. We are based in Chicago, headquartered there. About half of the startup companies we work with and about half of the established entities we work with are in Chicago, and the other half are located all over the world. And most of what we do is virtual, even before the craziness of the last 10 months. Israel has been a particularly interesting community for us to work with because there are so many incredible entrepreneurs who are building solutions with an eye on the US market. We've had about a dozen member companies from Israel, and we hope to work with many more in the years ahead. We've brought a number of groups to visit Israel over the last several years. We've hosted groups at our headquarters in Chicago. We have an ongoing partnership with Sheba Medical Center. So Israel is an important part of, and very important for us, for Matter. And so again, really delighted to be partnering you and working with you today. So last year, we worked with Roche Diabetes Care to help them identify novel solutions that they could work with to advance their business goals. We developed a global initiative to find amazing companies. We put the finalists through a multi-month process that helped the entrepreneurs understand how Roche works and help them build strong partnerships together. Interestingly, of the 4 companies that were finalists, 3 of them were Israeli. So So again, speaks to the caliber and the quality of the entrepreneurs and the technologies that are coming out of Israel. And Roche is moving forward with several of them. The overall winner of the program was Day 2. And for the next few minutes, got the pleasure of talking with Marco DiPolo, who is the point person from Roche who guided this initiative with us, and with Lihi Siegel, who's the CEO of Day 2. So Marco leads Roche's global strategic insights and open innovation team. He has 20 years of experience in diabetes and life sciences and has long been involved with innovation. He spent 6 years living in San Francisco, building Roche's incubator team before he assumed his current role. Lihi was CFO of a number of technology companies that she helped build prior to starting Day 2 in 2015. Day 2 sits, to me, at the intersection of several of the most interesting and promising developments in healthcare, microbiome, precision medicine, chronic disease management, and really represents a new way for people to help people manage their diabetes. So we'll talk about the collaboration that's unfolding between these two companies. It's very different from the last discussion that we just heard, which was an acquisition, a kind of a partnership. The relationship between Roche and Day 2 is quite different, so we should have some interesting insights that emerge from this conversation. So Marco, I'll start with you. Why don't you just tell us, high level about your Roche's open innovation efforts and your general approach to the startup community.
Thanks, Damon. And yes, so the open innovation function within Roche Diabetes Care is quite new. We started establishing this capability 1.5 years ago. And the purpose of the open innovation function is really to identify partnerships, especially helping us to identify or address new opportunities that we believe we can't address alone. And one of the key success metrics for us is really to acknowledge in the organization that the smartest people in the world do not work for Roche Diabetes Care. And our goal is to work together with those people, bring them on board and help us really address, again, unmet patient needs that we identify that we believe we can't address ourselves.
I love that realization or internalization of the realization that the smartest people in the world don't necessarily work for Roche. Having spent 10 years working for a large life science company, and we work with a lot of companies, and it is a key part of the journey to being able to work with companies such as Day 2. And so Lihi, I'll turn to you, and why don't you, interested in your experience thus far collaborating with Roche? What have been the key learnings from the process, thus far? I guess, how's it going?
The opportunity to be here and talk about this amazing relationship. Really grateful for Matter and Roche for the opportunity, and of course for being chosen as the winner of the Diabetes Care Innovation Award. So Day 2 really, we lead this, the telehealth precision nutrition solution. We have based on the gut microbiome science, and what we do innovatively is we really enable a path to remission for metabolic disease, and we're talking about diabetes and prediabetes, obesity, and NAFLD. We do this with our solution that's based on a gut profile test, a digital app to track the progress and the improvement, and to actually allow people to access our recommendations for them. And then we do this with ongoing clinical support through registered dietitians. And the outcomes of our program are really balancing the blood sugar and improving energy and sleep and reducing hunger and losing weight. So this is the core program that we have. And then when we set out to speak with Roche, although we do have, a lot of relationships with the employers and hospital systems and payers, the relationship with Roche we found to be really unique and special. There's been a tremendous partner for us. These, usually it's very hard to navigate a company like Roche, and after we won and started the discussions, we found that it could have gone in various areas, some more strategic for us, some not. And we think that the key success here is really the ability within Roche to really find that combination of business that's going to be great for them and great for us. And I think that's where we found we're starting with a first program, which is bringing our program to Roche's employer program. So just like we do with other employers, this is the core business of Day 2 today. And what we're doing is enrolling under these employer programs people with type 2 initially, and expanding into other diseases as well. And again, we profile their gut, we collect their personal and clinical parameters, we personalize their nutrition, make it accessible on the digital app, and follow this through a yearly program, which is recurring. And then the phase 2 of our collaboration is really to help Roche look at the need to expand beyond insulin-dependent diabetes, expand into pre-diabetes, collaborate around their B2B business, B2C relationships. And again, the guidance and support and resources that we've spent with Roche, just defining where we should end up in the organization is been really crucial and helpful. And we really think there's a lot of potential to expand this in 2021 and on.
So Marco, that kind of, Lihi touched on, and it sounds like there's been some really good collaboration and kind of, bi-directional conversation that you've been able to have that's helping inform what direction this partnership is going to go. And Marco, I'm interested in you providing your perspective a little bit on, what has it taken to get Roche ready to have this kind of a relationship, and what are the key ingredients? What does it take for a partnership like this to really be successful? Because, as he mentioned early on when she was talking, it's not always obvious with a gigantic, successful established company like Roche that people are people across the organization are invested enough in these kinds of relationships to spend the time to provide the insights to really be collaborative partners with companies like Day 2.
Yeah, so it's a good point. So traditionally, when Roche identified new opportunities, unmet patient needs, unmet market needs, we traditionally have been using a more technology scouting and technology evaluation approach, or a business development assessment or a business development approach. This time we said, no, that's not where we want to start, because first of all, we don't fully understand the problem space. So we need to educate ourselves first around the opportunity, what the opportunity is, before we can actually assess solutions. And eventually, in this case, we're not primarily interested in the solution, we're interested in a partnership. And that's not a question we put on the table in the past in the first place. And the question is really, if we bring our assets together, our talent, can we double, triple, or quadruple patient value or business value or market value? That's really at the core, that's really the core question. And in the past, kind of, we had a lot of shortcuts. We started pulling in metrics to assess a partner or a technology. But again, that wasn't the focus right now. Our focus was really to get to know the company and figure out and build a roadmap to answering the question, can we deliver more value together when we team up? And can we address unmet market or patient needs together? So Day 2 and Roche, that's really the core of our question. And one of the things we invested in, and Matt did an amazing job, helping us to get to know Day 2. So who are the people behind 2? What are their passions? Who are they? Their interests? And of course, understanding the business model, understanding the technology as well. Obviously, that's important too. at the same time also helping Day 2 to understand, okay, who is Roche? What do you want from us? Like really investing time in getting to know each other, getting to understand the interests, the priorities, and building trust in the relationship. That was really kind of at the center of this engagement for now. And that's why it has been very, very different to any previous engagement we've done with early stage, maybe Bismol solutions, other type of technologies. And that's why we feel also we build a lot of trust inside the organization to understand, oh, there's open innovation. Open innovation is about relationships first, and secondary about the technology evaluation. Right? So trying to really reposition how we approach open innovation. And again, it's trust building, relationship building, and bringing the right people together, joining efforts and address unmet market needs together.
And how do you, have you had the support of your, your CEO or your, like what kind of support do you have to have in the organization in order to be able to follow through on things like this? Because we've certainly seen companies that have people, who have a role sort of like yours, and they're really passionate about, open innovation and collaborations, and they run into too many, roadblocks within the company and ultimately can't get something done. So, what is there like one thing that's been really key, or has it just been years of working through the organization, or, what would you say is like the crux of how you've been able to advance this relationship this far?
Yeah, so that's the support question is a really good question. Obviously, there has been support for open innovation engagement, for doing this type of collaboration. However, there have been critical voices, right? Because we have an R&D organization, we have a lot of capabilities, a lot of other partnerships, and the question is like, why can we not do this ourselves? But as I mentioned at the beginning, the open innovation mindset really requires us to believe that there are smart people outside of Roche, and our goal is actually to team up with those people. So one of the critical elements, in my point of view, has been also to position open innovation in the form of a hypothesis, right? Versus telling the organization, open innovation and those early stage partnerships will actually help us to address a new market or grow faster and more effective. Like, well, how do you know? Like, you don't know. So what is the evidence? Prove it first. We said, hey, we believe that this partnership, for example, with Day 2, helps us to address unmet market needs better, faster, more effective, because we haven't been able to address those needs for over 10 or 15 years. And really kind of a soft marketing touch inside the organization to get the people behind this partnership.
That's great. It is. I hope everyone appreciates the complexity of what you have to navigate internally, and I mean, really ultimately the work you've done over the last several years in order to prepare the organization for this kind of relationship. Lihi, from your perspective, another thing that we've seen is companies that are, I guess, generally in your position. So really exciting new technology. You've got publications in the top tier journals. You're well funded with really top VCs behind you. You're scaling up. Is that there are so many opportunities that you have and to do so many different things. And one of your challenges is really to figure out what are the most promising things, what are the right things, because otherwise you can end up not able to execute on kind of all the different things that you want to accomplish. So you've obviously made a decision that this partnership with Roche is important and valuable, and therefore, you and your team are going to spend time on it and are going to really pursue it. And I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about, how do you view this collaboration through that lens, and what makes an opportunity like this with a company like Roche really worth investing your time in?
Yeah, that's an excellent question, and especially for this company, because it's so known, and the Weizmann science and then the Mayo Clinic science was, so in front and center, that we get so much inbound, I would say, biz dev, right? So you're spot on that from the very early start, we understood that we really have to focus. We have to focus geographically. We have to focus on the right target market, which in the US is, as I said, type 2, and now expanding to metabolic disease. So you're definitely spot on the focus side for this company. And especially in our stage, as you mentioned, we do need to choose corporate partners very carefully, make sure that the partnership advances a common mission. I think that's really the core point. If we can't find something that's very aligned in the interest between the partnership and us, if it's like this one-off, if it's taking us off the path of our core strategy, I think then it becomes a difficult partnership, right? And so what we were working on ever since we won, and we started with really deep discussions with Roche, as I mentioned, is really to see if we have that core alignment, right? If what we sell to employers and health and payers, and Roche as well has a B2B, right, offering. And then the B2C side is something that we are not doing directly, but we would love to do with a partner. And Roche could be that partner, right? So really looking into whether we have that mission, and we did find that, Roche and Day2 have a common mission. We're trying to bring those relief for those with metabolic disease, control it through the precision nutrition in our case, complement Roche, and be very synergetic to what they are offering. I think that is the core things that we look at when we choose if to do this or not.
Well, congratulations to you again for winning this.
Thank you.
The competition and the opportunity that's advancing with Roche, and just congratulations generally on really what's been an incredible story over the last 5-6 years as you've built the company. And Marco, congratulations to you on really having built something inside of Roche that allows the company to partner with an entity like Day2. Takes a lot of work to make these things happen inside of companies that are as complex as Roche are. So thanks to both of you for participating today and for the insights that you've provided. Really appreciate it. And I'll turn it back over, I think, to Mehdi from Imagine Bio, who's going to wrap things up.
Everyone, and say that, as we say, a match is made in heaven, or the ecosystem based on data and hope. But at the end, what makes it work is creating a real new culture that combines both companies together, I think. And we heard a lot about people, about creating trust, about having alignment on our vision, educating the big corporates on how digital health is done, and maybe educating the startups on, I would say, proper process and the way big corporates are doing things. We heard about openness to learn and to collaborate, and knowing that smart people are all over the place and career takes them to different places. And one good idea that I heard a few times was to start with a small project that doesn't need a huge commitment, and get to know each other well, and then many things can grow from there. So I would just like to thank everyone, to thank our amazing panelists, to thank our moderators, and of course you, all participants, and take us on to our next event that we're going to have in February, that we're going to further discuss what makes those collaborations successful. We're going to post it on the chat in a minute. And in terms of Imagine Bio, we're really happy that we have a chance to work with companies and big companies on innovation strategy and connecting them to the ecosystem.